All right. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you all for joining us for today's webinar on personalizing your preferences. So, the goal for today's webinar is to review the general preferences and the portal preferences page within the Flex menu. Talk about some of the more common or important, we can call them, options and settings inside those menus and give you a brief description about them and why it might be good for you to turn that setting on or off. So let's just dive in. As always, we start on the Flex dashboard here. And in the top left corner is the menu. And again, I'm looking for general and portal preferences. A few ways we can actually find those. One, we can use our eyeballs and we can scroll down to the preferences section. And within that, we have general and portal preferences. If you're like me and eyeballs do not like to work all the time, I think it's also easier to just search the menu. You can actually see the cursor is blinking. It's got this blue highlight. Don't be shy. Search the menu if you need help finding something. You can actually just search for the word preferences and boom, the menu is going to isolate just those results. So I think that might be the easiest way to go about doing that. So let's start in our general preferences while we're here. So the first page we land on here is the search tab. Right along the top here are different tabs. So what do all of these settings mean exactly? So starting from the top is default font size. So when you're viewing a list of results, you have kind of like the thumbnail picture, usually the address, maybe the price, the location, maybe the listing selling members, whatever your view of information is, you can choose the font size for that text here. You can actually nowadays choose it on the fly from that page. So if you're next time you're looking at a list of results and maybe you're squinting your eyes, a lot of eyeball talk. If you're squinting your eyes because it's so small, check out this section to increase the font size of that, or peek around the top of your list of results. You'll see the plus or minus sign along the top of your list of results. I am actually going to skip over this option here because this one talks about IDX, out of my world. All right, the next option is expand all fields for quick searches. So you can imagine running a quick search, and on that left-hand side is the list of fields we can use for criteria, address, bedrooms, baths, list price, et cetera, et cetera. So you may know that you actually have to click on the field name itself to open it up in order to input data there for yourself to search. If you don't like to do all that clicking and you would rather it just always be open for you to input the information into, you can actually turn this setting on. And then the next time you open a quick search, all of those fields will be open for you without needing to click. All right, default for full listing reports from search results. So when you are using the quick search bar up here and you are viewing a listings detail report, which one by default do you want to see? The public version or the private version? And then you can choose a default listing report. So when you first go in to view a listing, what report do you want to land on? So the detail report is largely what I think everyone thinks about when they think about viewing the listing in the MLS and kind of the layout and the information it gives you. That's probably the default report. But of course, we have a bunch of other reports you can use if you prefer those. And again, you can switch these while you're viewing a listing too. This is just the one that's going to land you on first. And of course, you can see we have some odd names like My Flyer, Test Flyer. So those are custom reports that I've built for myself over the time. And even custom flyers that you've created for yourself show up here too. And then we have choose a default business card. So typically it's either generic or profile. You can see I have some custom business cards too. You can also choose this on the fly as well. So when you're sending an email out to a client, you can change which business card you're using. All right, and that's our first tab. So let's move on to the next one, which is email. So here at the top, we have default type, so either HTML or text. brief description without me being someone who really knows what I'm talking about on this. My understanding is HTML allows for like special text. So think of like italicized, bold, maybe it's red text, images, the fancy background colors that some emails come in with. That is all HTML code, I guess. That's kind of driving those custom styles. Some inboxes out there don't accept HTML. They're just looking for the text of the email. So that's just black and white. The text of the body of the email is all they're going to get. So by default, we choose HTML just in case you guys make some fun customizations in your emails. Default email signature to check. So with this turned on, it just means Flex is going to apply that default signature that we chose in the previous tab to all of the emails going out. If you would rather not to include the default signature from Flex and just type out your own signature card at the bottom of the emails, you can certainly do that. I think it's a lot easier to have Flex do it for us. And then you can also have your photo and your logo be sent out with your signature card too. Default email attachments. So when you're manually sending an email to a client and you are choosing the interactive version, if you're choosing one at all, we'll get to that. What type of attachments or what type of, I guess, like bonus information do you want your clients to see when they're interacting with that listing? So we can see like virtual tours. Yes, of course. Tax information, documents, open houses are turned on by default. Be honest, I don't even know what supplements means. But you could also turn on supplements and the mortgage calculator. So those two things would just be a part of that email they're getting when they're viewing the listing. Moving right along to the daily hot sheet. So we have two options, the 24-hour and the custom hot sheet. I'm not going to go into specifics about how you create those for yourselves because we have a whole other webinar about that. But in the Flex menu under the daily functions section, there is a hot sheet page that you can get to, and that will include a 24-hour hot sheet and your custom hot sheet. And whatever settings that you have plugged in there at the moment that this email goes out, which is usually around 7 a.m., if I was to choose the 24-hour hot sheet, whatever settings I have on that page for my 24-hour hot sheet, I will get an email of the results of that hot sheet directly to my email every morning. So it's a great way to start your day, getting into your hot sheet and checking out what's new on the market without necessarily going through all of the steps to get into Flex and potentially getting distracted. So if it sounds easy to get it in your email, set this up for yourself. So the next option is Flex MLS email and print. Prompt me to choose interactive or printer-friendly version when emailing. So I think the interactive version is what most agents think about when sending an email to a client, right? It's the link in the email that the client clicks on. It brings them to a Flex page and they're able to review that listing kind of with live data being updated as it does in the MLS, as opposed to the printer-friendly version. So the printer-friendly version is actually just a flat PDF of the report. So it's not being updated in real time. It is at that moment, this is the information of the listing. So think of interactive as a always refreshing, up-to-date link. The printer-friendly is just a PDF document of the report at that moment. If you have this turned off like I do, so it's not asking me to choose interactive or printer-friendly, that means it's automatically choosing interactive. Kind of on the basis of the idea is if you want to send them a flat PDF report, you can do that through the print section. So either way, you can accomplish both of these things, whether this option is turned on or off. And then default configuration. So when you are sending the listing out to a client, do you want them to see the public version or the private version? Client was doing a lot of heavy lifting there because if they're a client of yours and they're signed with you, right, share with them the private version, share with them that private information that we don't typically share with the public. All right, and that's it for this page. So let's move on to the dashboard tab. So when we first log into Flex, right, I start most of my webinars by saying, per usual, we're landing on our Flex dashboard. That's because here in the settings, I have it chosen that when I log into Flex, it automatically starts me on that dashboard. You have a couple other options. You could choose quick search. So the first time you log into Flex in the morning, you're actually landing on a fresh quick search page. You're jumping right into the action. Very similarly, you could also choose a saved search, which means it's going to jump and land you into a list of your saved searches. So again, it's kind of like getting you right into the action, right into the meat and potatoes of the day. I like to land on the dashboard and check out some of the gadgets for the stats and the hot sheets, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I like to land, but up to you guys. So the listings to expire setting is giving you a certain number of days before your listing's expiration date that it's going to show up under the listings to expire section of the My Listings page. So if you want to see your soon to be expiring listings sooner than 7 days, feel free to change the setting. Maybe you want 14 days, you want 2 weeks notice before your listings expire to make sure you're signing a new contract, getting an extension, or talking to your client about perhaps letting the listing expire and moving on. Sold listings. So when you're viewing your My Listings page, any listing that has been in the closed status for 365 days, or I should say less than 365 days, will still show up in the sold listing section of that page. Anything older than that will drop off and you won't see it. So this is meant to keep your page clean, so you're not seeing just years of sold listings that you don't need to see on a quick glance. If 365 days is too long, maybe you're doing a ton of business, right? And that page is just filling up because of all the deals you're closing. And maybe you say, hey, I only really need to be able to, in a quick glance, see the last 90 days of my closed listings. Feel free to change that here, and it's just going to clean up that page for you. But again, totally up to you. So we can go to the listings tab now. We can move along. My listing statuses to include. So this is all about that My Listings page. And you can kind of see that half are turned on, half are turned off, which is kind of interesting. So this is actually another thing that I guide agents to pretty frequently. They'll say, hey, I have a listing and I can't find it on the My Listings page. And I'll say, okay, well, what status is it in? And usually they'll say like, oh, it's coming soon, no show, or active under contract. Maybe it's withdrawn or expired. I should stick to those because those are turned off in my settings currently. They'll say, oh, well, I have a withdrawn listing and I'm trying to bring it back to active and I can't find it on the My Listings page. I would guide them to the general preferences and saying, check what statuses are here. By default, Flex doesn't want to show you all of your listings on the My Listings page. You can kind of tell based on this that the assumption is that you really are looking at your on market statuses or like a pending listing where you're currently or actively working with them, right? And then anything off market, quote unquote, Flex thinks, oh, maybe they don't want to see that on the My Listings page. Well, if you do, come here and make these changes. And speaking of that off market, if you do have an off market status turned on, let's just do withdrawn, right? I'm going to say I need to turn withdrawn on so I can see that on my page. If it's been withdrawn for more than 30 days, you're still not actually going to see it on the page because this is saying any listing that's been off the market for more than 30 days is going to drop off the list. So you might also need to extend this maybe to 60 days because you withdrew it, 5 weeks ago, and now your client is ready to come back on the market. You still might not be able to see it because of when Flex is trying to take those listings off. And again, the goal for Flex is to kind of like keep you clean and organized by default. So come in and change that to your preferences. All right, we can move along to notifications. So not only will you see your expired listings on the listings to expire section of your listings page, you can also get notified via email of upcoming expiring listings of yours. So by default, the option is turned on and it's set to 7. Again, maybe you don't want to receive these emails. Simply just turn this off. Maybe 7 days isn't enough time for you to get in touch with your client and make a plan of what to do with this listing before it expires. So maybe you want, again, 2-week notice. Maybe you just want a 2-week notice that your listing's about to expire. We have suspend all portal login notice messages. So when your clients are interacting with their portal, you might be getting notified about that. If those emails are obnoxious, this is actually where you would go to turn those off. And then enable notifications for, again, notifications in this sense are going to be emails. So if a client messages you through the portal, if you're, I don't know if we allow offices to broadcast messages, but if the office was to broadcast a message, more importantly, though, is the MLS broadcasts a message. And we've seen those. I think we have to update our terms and service, our EULA, every year. And that's a broadcast message, right? You log in, Flex pops up this big message that you have to interact with in some way before moving on to your day-to-day work. Those are broadcast messages. So you'll see those from us occasionally. Keep those turned on, these settings turned on if you want to be notified other than just logging in that those things are happening. And then opt out of all bulk emails. So this setting actually doesn't do anything for our MLS. And that's because we don't give you guys the opportunity to send bulk emails out to members of the MLS. You do have the reverse prospecting function, of course, but that is more of a warm lead than what I would consider kind of like a spam cold lead of just sending an email to everyone in the MLS. If you feel like you do get these bulk emails, not to put the blame and point to anybody, but my understanding is that your local board is willing to hand out a list of their local board membership so that people can email within that local board community. So whether this is on or off, it's accomplishing the same thing. Nothing. It's accomplishing the same nothing. All right, we can move along to contacts. Here's what I was talking about with reverse prospecting. So each client of yours in the contact management, you can turn this on and off if you want to. But I think the more the merrier with reverse prospecting. Not going into too much detail about it, but reverse prospecting is really a tool that a listing agent would use. And what the system does is it scans for all of our members. And if there's a member of ours, an agent, if there's an agent of ours that has a contact with a saved search that the listing agent's property meets the criteria of, it gives that listing agent the opportunity to reach out to you and say, hey, you have a contact that my property meets the criteria of. Can you share this with them? And the list agent, of course, doesn't see the name of the contact, but in the email, it will give the buyer's agent, the person representing that contact, it will give them the name of that contact. And so it's just another way to try to give your listing a marketing push in a warm lead sense and not like a cold lead. So I hope that makes sense. Please keep this on by default. Not a lot of agents use it, but the more people who do use it, right, the more beneficial the system and the tool becomes for reverse prospecting. And essentially you're missing out on potential properties that your buyer client might want to see. So don't give them less opportunity to find their home, right? All right. Finally, last but not least is comparables. So when you're running a comparable search in Flex, and again, this isn't the webinar to show you all of those tools. We have a Searching Made Easy webinar you guys should check out the next time we're hosting it. So when you're running a comparable search, these are the default settings Flex is choosing to find your results from, right? So usually with a comparable, right, you're looking typically within a radius of like a center point. So by default, right, it's a 1/4 mile from the center point, either an address, typically an address, the subject property address you're looking for comparables for. 1/4 mile, that seems pretty low, but feel free to change this, and you can change it within the search too, right? This is just how Flex wants to get your search started. Price adjustments, right? It's going to be looking for the exact price, but you could say, you know, oh, okay, like 10% plus or minus, right? By default, same with bedrooms, right? Okay, well, my subject is 2 bedrooms, so it can't have any less bedrooms, but the comp could have 3 bedrooms, and I would make that adjustment and feel comfortable. right? So you can kind of choose how much leeway Flex has to find you comparables by default. And then, of course, you can choose those statuses that they're searching for as well. So it looks like they're looking for active, pending, and closed. Typically with comparables, right, my understanding is you're really looking for closed listings because an active listing might sell for a lot less than what it's listed for. And you don't want to accidentally use that kind of like dream value in a sense of like pricing the next property. So if you don't even want to see active and pending by default, just turn them off and just find closed. Again, within the search, once the search is started, you can still enter all the criteria as normal. Cool. So that's the general preferences. Let's make a quick pivot. Let's make a quick pivot to the portal preferences. So we're going back to the menu in portal preferences. There's not a whole lot to say about this one. A lot of these, like portal basics, for example, right, is just giving you like the / at the end of the Flex URL that you could change. Here's a link to the portal. You can turn it off by default here, right? Intro has a video that you can watch to learn a little bit more about how the portal functions. I think really the big ones are the news feed. So the news feed bucket, I'll call it here, is giving you what statuses should show on your client's newsfeed when they're opening up the portal. So let's just say maybe your client doesn't want to see closed listings. Turn it off. Maybe your client only wants to see active listings in their portal. Turn off everything but active. Totally. This is just unfortunately a account-wide default. So there is a little bit of rigidness you have to have. If someone only wants to see active in their newsfeed, you have to tell them, unfortunately, it is kind of like an account setting, and I have to have these other settings turned on. We can move on to default subscription settings. So this one, I think, is probably the most important. So these are what I would call the events. These are the events that take place to a listing that would trigger a subscription email to be sent to your client. So if you want your clients to be told that one of the listings that match their criteria is having an open house, turn that setting on. And then whenever an open house is scheduled for that property, they're going to get notified about that open house. So pick the ones that you feel are best suited for you. And last but not least, I want to talk about is the listing content options. So again, this is when they're viewing a listing from their portal. What kind of like extra content do you want them to see? Do you want them to see the open houses? Do you want them to see documents? Of course you do. Or do you want them to see the tax info? I think, again, this is one of those other places where if somebody is saying my client can't find the documents, I will lead them here and double check the setting. Make sure documents is turned on here if you want your clients to see documents when they're viewing their subscription emails. Super important. And of course, when you make these changes, don't forget to hit save on the bottom right to lock them in. And that way you're not thinking you made a change and nothing actually changes. Cool. And with that, I am going to reset back to the dashboard because that's it. We covered both of the preferences pages. So I want to thank you all again for joining me for our webinar today on personalizing your preferences. If you have any questions after the webinar ends, please feel free to call us at 780-1366 or send us an email at help@mainlistings.com. Thank you guys again and have a great rest of your day.